what I found was a gentleman who was kind, compassionate, and so much conviction and faith that I'd never witnessed anything like that before. And I have to tell you this one quick story, because I always have to have a story. He won't remember this because he had a couple other things going on that day. But we were walking from one building to the next, and I said, well, I suppose it'd be nice just to go home and fix some fence for cows right now, wouldn't it? Ammon said, Trent, we've been fixing fence. And that was one of the great misnomers. The place was better when they left it than when they found it. And nobody ever heard that story. And so I think it's, and then through the past 2 years, we've had the opportunity to witness and watch the actions of a man who was driven by faith unlike anybody else I think I've ever met. And that's why it's our distinct honor and privilege to have Ammon Bundy represent us, modern day robbers.
All right, I'll get this computer up here. Thank you for having me. Thank you for being here. I know there's been a lot of words that have been said at this event, and I hope that we can determine what needs to be done by the speakers and do some good with it. I hope that today I am not just an entertainer, that I can present to you something that's worthwhile, that something that can do some good and help us and help our the next generation. That is why I'm here. I know that I spoke a few times, not very many since I've been out, the feedback that I've got is that a lot of people want to, hear the story and know the story and know the details. And I'm not going to do that today. I think there's some value in that, but I feel that with this group, I need to be a little more direct. I think I need to, the best I can, to share with you what I believe is happening. And of course, we'll mix it with some of the other stuff too. But I first want you to know that I am a Christian, that I believe in the Lord Jesus Christ, that I believe that He is the Savior and Redeemer of this world. I believe that He created this world for the benefit of man. I also believe in the Bible. I believe that it is the Word of God and that it teaches us and gives us a moral direction of what should and should not happen, what is right and what is wrong. I also know that America is a Bible nation. I'd like to read something that is in the beginning of the Founder's Bible, which was a gift that someone gave me just a few days ago, actually. It reads, "The Bible and America both enjoyed unprecedented success. The Bible is the best-selling book of all times. It has sold hundreds of millions of copies worldwide and has been the best-selling book in America for centuries. No other book is comparable. Similarly, America is unrivaled in its success. Born in 1776 with the Declaration of Independence, she has had only one form of government since the U.S. Constitution was ratified in 1789. Neither our closest allies nor our fiercest enemies have experienced the stability with which we have been blessed. The accomplishments of both America and the Bible are unmatched but not unrelated. For the Bible was the key factor in America's success, a fact largely unknown today, but widely acknowledged by our national leaders throughout American history. For example, Franklin D. Roosevelt says this, "In the formative days of the Republic, the directing influence the Bible exercised upon the fathers of the nation is conspicuously evident. This book continues to hold its unchallenged place in the most loved, the most quoted, and the most universal read and pondered of all times, the volumes which our libraries contain. We cannot read the history of our rise and development as a nation without reckoning with the place the Bible has occupied in the shaping the advance of the Republic. President Woodrow Wilson, the teachings of the Bible are so interwoven and intertwined with our whole civil and social life that it would be literally, I do not mean figuratively, I mean literally, impossible for us to figure to ourselves what that life would be if these teachings were removed. We would lose almost all standard by which we now judge both public and private morals. All the standards towards which we, with more or less resolution, strive to raise ourselves, almost every man who has by his life work added to the sum of human achievement, of which the race is proud, of which people are proud, almost every such man has blessed his life work largely upon the teachings of the Bible. Andrew Jackson, the Bible is the rock in which our republic rests. President Ronald Reagan, if the many influences that have shaped the United States of America into a distinctive nation and people, of the many influences that have shaped the United States of America into a distinct nation and people, none may be said to be more fundamental and enduring than the Bible. The Bible and its teachings held from the basis for the founding fathers abiding belief in the unalienable rights of the individual, rights which they found implicit in the Bible's teachings of the inherent worth and dignity of each individual. And finally, President Abraham Lincoln, the Bible is the best gift God has given to man. All the good the Savior gave to the world was communicated through this book. But for it, we could not know right from wrong. So, what does the Bible teach us? And how can it guide us when it comes to what is wrong and what is right with the land and resources in this nation? And does it apply? Does it mean anything? Can we learn what is right? Can we learn and find our bearing by the teachings of the Bible? Did not the founders do the same thing? Did not we receive great success for several decades, even centuries, because of the foundings and the teachings that were taught and understood by our founders? Can we not do the same thing? I would like to draw a few things, and I obviously will connect this all together if I can. But in Genesis 1, the Bible teaches us that God created the earth and man. And he gave man dominion over all things and commanded mankind to multiply and to fill the earth. Genesis 1, 27 through 30 reads, "So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them. And God blessed them. And God said unto them, Be fruitful and multiply it and replenish the earth and subdue it. And have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the fowl of the air and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth. And God said, Behold, I have given you every herb bearing seed, which is upon the face of the earth, and every tree in the which is the fruit of the tree yielded seed. To you shall be for meat. And to every beast of the earth, and to every fowl of the air, and to everything that creepeth upon the earth, wherein there is life, I have given every green herb for meat. God also said, For the earth is full, and there is enough and to spare. Yea, I prepare all things, and give it unto the children of men, to be agents unto themselves. Goes on, For behold, the beast of the field and the fowl of the air and that which cometh of the earth is ordained for the use of man, for food and for raiment, and that he might have in abundance. Timothy 4:3, forbidding to marry and commanding to abstain from meats which God hath created, to be received with thanksgiving of them which believe and know the truth, is not ordained of God. And woe be unto man that sheddeth blood or that wasteth flesh, and hath no need. We see here that in the Scriptures, in the Bible, we have guidance on what we are to do and how we are to act, and what is our right, and what the earth was created for, what the animals are for, and what the grass is for, what the trees are for, what the fruit is for. Do we see a different doctrine? Do these different doctrines affect us? Have they destroyed our livelihoods? What if I told you we were being lied to? What if I told you that these lies were being told to get gain and to further a different doctrine, a different theology, a different belief? What if I told you that these people, these individuals or groups, if they are allowed to continue with their plans, that they will entirely destroy the happiness of human life? What if I gave you proof? Would you believe me? I want to talk about a few things. I want to talk about overpopulation. I want to tell you that it's a lie. Now, I know there's 49 million people in California, so sometimes driving on the freeway, it's pretty hard to believe that. But I'm going to give you some facts. If facts over California, Nevada, the United States, and the earth. Each household in California could own 12.42 acres. Each household in Nevada could own 88 acres. Each household in the United States could own 21.3 acres. And each household on the earth could own 42 acres per household. Now, many people want to live in the cities. And that's their right. And they enjoy it. They like that lifestyle. And that is great that they want to. And what that does is allow the people who want to live in the rural to have the land and resources and to provide their income and food and resources and commodities for those who want to live in the city. Now I'm going to go on. Scientists estimate that crops cover only 12% of the Earth's land surface, including the grazing land. Scientists estimate that only 3% of the world's land surface is covered by cities, or urban areas, only 3%. Scientists estimate that Earth, at its current population and natural resource consumption rate, could continue to host life for at least 1.7 billion years. And there's a little caveat: as long as there's not a nuclear holocaust or an errant asteroid or some other disaster that doesn't intervene. And if anybody wants these, where my sources are from, I could give them to you. I'll just send you an email later. So, water shortage is a lie. Between 1994 and 2006, scientists measured an 18% increase in fresh water discharge into the ocean. An 18% increase. So we're just dumping our fresh water into the ocean. Even on the driest year on record history in 2013, it still rained 3.6 inches in Los Angeles. An inch of rainfall in LA generates 3.8 billion gallons of runoff. So you're talking about more than 12 billion gallons of water that could be captured. There's enough rainwater to be harvested to produce 30 to 50% of the entire city's water need. The small Los Angeles River alone carries more than 98 million gallons a day of water into the Pacific. And during times of peak flow, the river carries more than 118 billion gallons a day. Only 1/3 of all available fresh water on Earth is diverted to human or animal use, and this includes crops, irrigation. Scientists have determined that very little moisture, if any, escapes out of the atmosphere. And if any moisture does, it is replaced with asteroid ice entering the atmosphere. So we literally, the water, the moisture does not leave our atmosphere. It does not leave. In fact, the scientists have proven that through ice on the asteroids, there's more moisture that enters the atmosphere than leaves the atmosphere. So I ask you, why the lies? Well, I want to talk a little bit about a ranch, the Ammon Ranch. There was a study near the Ammon Ranch. As many of you know, there's the wildlife refuge there, or should we call it the Harney County Resource Center? There was a study done on that land in 1975 of that area. The study showed that the no-use policies of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service on the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge were causing the wildlife to leave the refuge and move to private property. The study showed that the private property adjacent to the Malheur Wildlife Refuge produced 4 times more duck and geese than the refuge did. It also showed that the migrating birds were 13 times more likely to land on private property than on the refuge. And I will add to this that when this was discovered through, it was a public document that actually Susie Ammon discovered. But it was her own study. It was U.S. Fish and Wildlife's own study, and she began to publicize this. In return, all they did is began to persecute the Ammons even further. An independent, I forgot my water. I might need a drink. I apologize. I had a little water that someone gave me, and appreciate that. An independent firm conducted an environmental study on the desert tortoise in southern Nevada. Thank you very much. So this independent study was done on the desert tortoise, and they determined that the cattle created a habitat that was more suitable to the desert tortoise, and without the cattle, the desert tortoise was at a disadvantage. The study showed that the desert tortoise was more populated when the cattle was more populated, and declined when the cattle count declined. A BLM whistleblower reported that the BLM knew the main cause of the desert tortoise population. It was the ravens, the blackbirds. The BLM had 55-gallon barrels, several 55-gallon barrels, full of 2 to 3 inch tortoise shells that had holes in them from the ravens picking through them. They were told not to reveal this truth to the public and continued to blame the land users for the decline in tortoise population. Meanwhile, the raven became overpopulated. And why? Because it was on the endangered species list. Put yourself in that situation. It's a lose-lose situation. But the fact is, the cattle were actually helping the habitat for desert tortoise. And the BLM, Bureau of Land Management agents, continued with the narrative and have destroyed literally hundreds of ranches on using the Endangered Species Acts in this very way. So I again ask, so why the lies? Here in California, Governor Brown demanded that the Californians pass a water bond for $7.5 billion, of which $2 billion was for dams. And so the Californians passed that measure. And now, where does the money go? To protecting fish. Not one dime has gone towards dams. In fact, we know, many of us know what's happening to those dams. The Clark County, Nevada Commissioner, in conjunction with the Bureau of Land Management, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, added a desert tortoise mitigation fee to each building permit in the county. This fee was to pay for the rehabilitation of the desert tortoise. So basically to move the desert tortoise to a less populated area. Total collected in this mitigation fee was approximately $2 billion. At the same time, the BLM designated all the southern Nevada as a desert tortoise mitigation area and closed all the grazing allotments in the southern Nevada district. This forced 52 ranching families off their ranches. My father refused to leave his ranch and his heritage. He was the only one. The BLM and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service built a desert tortoise care facility just outside of Las Vegas. The supposed plan was to bring the desert tortoise in and check them all out before placing them in their new habitat. Now, 20 years later, it's actually over 20 years, we have the results of this desert tortoise protection plan. What are the results? Less than $100 million out of the $2 billion collected from the building permit mitigation fees can be accounted for. No one knows where the money went, not even the county commissioners. 52 ranchers were forced to leave their heritage and their incomes and find another way to make a living. After driving the rightful owners off the land, BLM, under federal code, gained full control of the land and the resources in the area. Not one desert tortoise was rehabilitated into the mitigation area. The excuse for this was that the tortoise caught some disease while in the care facility and was not healthy enough to be placed on the land. And after 20 years of collecting these mitigation fees, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the Bureau of Land Management euthanized thousands of desert tortoise because they claimed they had run out of funds to support the project. Why the lies? Harney County. I know I'm not the authority of Harney County. There's individuals in here that are from there that know a lot more than I do about Harney County. So I don't want to claim that I am. And stand up and tell me if what I'm saying is right or wrong, if I'm wrong. But there's a valley there, basically the refuge, or that green area. It's a beautiful area. It's a fertile valley. It had lots of water. And in the mid-1800s, people began homesteading the valley and developing their ranches there. By the 1900s, over 100 high-producing ranches were established in the valley. The people established a water system that further irrigated the valley and further increased the production of the valley. And at the time, it was known as a state-of-the-art irrigation system. In the mid-1900s, the valley was one of the highest producing areas in the northwest United States. The county officials reported that the families in the county had the highest family incomes in the state of Oregon. The homes were busy, the stores were busy, the churches were full, and the next generation was optimistic about the future. Now let's look at Harney County. The valley is now a national bird refuge, claimed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. The water infrastructure and irrigation system was destroyed in a restoration project. The homesteads were mostly burnt down or bulldozed, or they had to be abandoned. Now, after 7 years of plunder on the private-owned ranches, most of them are owned, actually titled, to the U.S. government. For the past 20 years, the county officials have reported the lowest family incomes in the state. Over 70% of the people in Harney County draw an income from the government, and the new generation has to leave because there is no future opportunity there. Many of the businesses are left to beg for government contracts or some type of service that they can provide the government. And that's the situation they're in. An 89-year-old man who was born in the valley and lived there his entire life said, "They took our valley that was once the jewel of the county and turned it into a big weed patch." I ask you, how did that land transfer from over 100 private-owned ranches to the U.S. government? The Ammons were one of the last ranchers in the area to own any sizable land around the refuge. And now both the father, Dwight, 76, and his son, Stephen, 45, are in prison, suffering through a 5-year sentence for burning grass on their own property, on their own ranch. We can have a discussion, a detailed one later, if someone wants to challenge me of whether that range is their right, vested property right. Why the lies? Why the destruction? I have been able to see in the experiences that I've had over the last several years that there is a collusion. That there is two main groups, if you will, that are working together. And I think it's very important that we identify these people and be able to place ourselves and to place them in history. And to be able to see what happened to the people that allowed these groups of individuals to control their land and resources. What happened to those people? And then also, in the very rare case, what happened to the people that didn't allow them? So have you ever heard of a friendly lawsuit? Anybody ever heard of a friendly lawsuit? So it's when one party sues another party to get what they both want. And we may not want to believe it. But a lot of times the BLM says, well, we have to do something because we're going to get sued. Or these federal agencies, or we have to do something because we're going to get sued. But when you look into many of these cases, you see that that's not necessarily the case. That these cases are friendly lawsuits. And that the other party is usually a group of extreme environmentalists. Groups like the Center for Biological Diversity. And they will negotiate in the back rooms as they are friendly and know each other well, and they will determine what needs to happen and how they can use the courts in order to accomplish what they want to accomplish. Now, let me tell you a little bit about the Center for Biological Diversity. But I want to be clear that the Center for Biological Diversity is only one example of many. And I also want to be clear that the founder of the Center for Biological Diversity, Kieran Suckling, is only an example of a whole group of individuals, people, with a complete different theology than what we just discussed in the Bible. The Center for Biological Diversity is an organization that sued the BLM because they did not use force upon my dad to remove the cattle from Gold Butte. They actually threatened to sue. This organization has around 107 employees, mostly attorneys. None of them lived in the area where my father's ranch was. But they were highly influential into what happened there and how the BLM acted. And the BLM used the excuse, the Bureau of Land Management agents used the excuse that if they did not act, that they would be sued by the Center for Biological Diversity. Let me tell you a little bit about the founder of the Center for Biological Diversity, Kieran Suckling. So he founded it. I don't know when. But let me just read what it says actually on their website about him. He founded the center. In addition to overseeing the conservation and financing program, so he's over the money. He created and maintains the country's most comprehensive endangered species database. Kieran acts as a liaison between the center and other environmental groups, negotiates with government agencies, and writes and lectures. He has authored scientific articles and critical essays on biodiversity issues. Now, you would think an individual like this must have a doctorate degree in, biology or range management or, animal science or something to that, right? Well, let me tell you what he has. Kieran Suckling holds a master's degree in philosophy from the State University of New York. He also entered a doctor's degree in world religion. Let me, if I can, I would like to read to you a dialogue of Kieran Suckling with an individual, I believe, from the Range magazine, a reporter from the Range magazine. So the reporter's name is Wally. And Wally starts off, "What about those people you are putting off the land?" This is after, quite a extensive interview. And so he goes, "What about those people you are putting off the land and out of work? What is your ethic and social responsibility to those humans?" Suckling answered slowly and cautiously, choosing each word with care and sidestepping the question. "Our government and its corporate sponsors have created a system of subsidies that has to be abolished. Choosing each word, they turn the lands into a commodity. We have to get public land users off this welfare system. It is not a simple thing to break those chains." Then Wally said, "But what about those people who are suffering during this change?" Suckling, "As I say, it is not a simple thing. We have entire communities that have grown up in this system of land-based government subsidies. To change that is not a painless thing. Wally, you are creating rural refugees. Kieran's ego finally shows. His speech picks up. And I'm reading this right out of the report. I don't want to change it. Speech picks up and picks up speed and emphasizes. It is more than rural. I am dealing with the Grand Canyon, Hoover Dam, and Los Angeles. 13 million people are used to getting their water this way. I say that's great, but we are going to show them that there's a different way to do it. Wally, you are using force change on society, and are you aware of it? Suckling, yes. Isn't that what an activist is? What do you think an activist is? We change society. Wally, can't you do this in a humane and gentle way? Suckling, it is sad, but I don't hear you put that in a different relationship, or in a direct relationship to effect on the land. I hear you talk about the pain of people, but I don't see you match that up with the pain of the species. Wally, dumbfounded, says, what? Suckling, a Louch minnow is more important than I say Betty and Jim's ranch. 1,000 times more important. The New American Magazine did an article by the title of Green Religion. And they proposed that people have adopted in the place of Judeo-Christian religion and culture with environmentalism. They continue to propose that this definitely and can be defined as a religion, as an extreme religion. They propose that they have a God, which is the earth. They have a priestly class, prophets, sin, redemption, atonement, indulgences, holy books, documents, a church, a holy day, official doctrines, and even the heresies. I won't draw that conclusion myself. I think you should look at it and understand why they drew that conclusion. I do believe that they're right, though. And some of the leaders of this extreme environmental groups of religion, if you will, one by the name of Al Gore. And I'll read you some quotes of these individuals so you can help you make your own determination. So this is our former U.S. Vice President. The fate of mankind, as well as religion, depends on the emergence of a new faith in the future. Armed with such faith, we might find it possible to sanctify the earth. Mikhail Gorbachev, former head of the Soviet Union. I envision the principles of the Earth Charter to be a new form of the Ten Commandments. They lay the foundation for a sustainable global Earth community. Nature is my God. To me, nature is sacred. Trees are my temples, and forests are my cathedrals. Christian Anton Mayer, also known as Karl Amri. He's a German environmentalist and a writer, influential writer in Germany, and leads in many ways this religion. So we in the Green Movement aspire to a culture modeled in which killing a forest will be considered more contemptible and more criminal than the sale of a 6-year-old child to an Asian brothel. Rajendra, I'm going to get this name back, but Pachabri, who was the head of the UN IPCC between 2002 and 2015. For me, the protection of the planet Earth, the survival of all species, and the sustainability of our ecosystem is more than a mission. It is my religion and my drama. The magazine, the New American Magazine, concludes by saying environmental religion is a bad thing for two reasons. It is based on false premises, and two, uses false premises to seek to impose the vision of the world by force of government, namely the United Nations and the federal agencies. What makes environmentalism so deceptive and so dangerous is the fact that it is becoming the religion of choice for the global environmental crowd. And it is especially dangerous because it is not being presented as a religion. To the contrary, it is being presented as science. It is presented as something non-religious. So people who, for whatever reason, reject traditional religion can follow it and not even know they're being religious about the environment. The United Nations is essentially a global government under construction. The fact that the UN functions as a church for the religion of environmentalists reveals just how dangerous this religion is. Give a global government the authority to essentially sponsor a religion, and you won't just have a state religion, something now rejected by most of the Western world, but you will have a world religion. I'd like to just emphasize something that I saw, or I think the Center for Biological Diversity actually makes my point here, which a couple days ago, I don't know how long ago, but there was a bulletin, a media advisory, and it's informing their followers that there's going to be a meeting in Modesto, California, and they're asking them to come and protest here. Now, it says a few things, accurate or inaccurate. That really doesn't matter. But the point that I wanted to make, or at least use this, it says the Bundys and their followers have been emboldened by these recent court victories. They make appearances throughout the West to foment anti-public land sentiments and spread misinformation in an attempt to wrest control of the public lands from the people. The animals, plants, and communities that rely on the cherished public lands are threatened if the Bundy's radical ideology spread. Now, you might say, well, why are you reading that? And the reason is I want to point out something. He says the animals, plants, and communities. He's not talking about human communities. He's talking about the animal communities. And I know that because of many of his other talks and how he uses communities and emphasizes that the relationship between animal and animal and between human as an animal and the other animals. Their doctrine is very clear. It is becoming more and more clear. They're becoming less and less ashamed, or at least more open with it. And that is that there is no God. He did not create this earth, and that we are not children of a God, of the Creator. That the species, that humans are just another species. That through evolution have advanced intellectually and become a superior species. And therefore it is their moral duty to balance the species. And the only way they can do that is by harming humans. By driving them off the land. By creating every disadvantage for humans. And until we understand that, we can't truly understand what's going on. Because who in their right mind would do what they're doing? Who would destroy the ranches, destroy the dams, destroy the farms. Who would do that? Only someone who does not want humans to be fed, for them to live in a place they want to live, to be able to enjoy life, and as the founder said it, to pursue happiness. And when you begin to understand that, you begin to start to put the pieces together of why they do what they do. And where this, lack of better words, nonsense comes from. They are an enemy to humans. They live by a different doctrine. And it is not based upon Christian principles. It is based on a completely different theology. Now, if I had time, which I don't think I do right now, but we could go further into the Bible, into the Scriptures and into history. And we could see where this religion has surfaced multiple times. One name for it was Baal worshippers. Baal. Go study how detrimental they became to the people and their freedom, and how they always seek the power of government to enforce their ideologies upon the people in the protection of the species, in the control of people in general, and in the taking of freedom and the agency of man. How much time do I got?
15 minutes.
So I ask you, am I talking nonsense? The land and the resources are necessary for the survival and the pursuit of happiness of man. And the Lord gave this earth to mankind for our happiness, for our probation. And control of the earth, the land, and the resources must not be held in the hands of the few or the extreme. And that is what is happening. There is a centralization, or there is a centralization of power that is happening, and that centralization of power is designed to be able to get the land and the resources, which is where all wealth is derived from. But it's designed to get all the land and the resources in the hands of and the power of one body. The founders understood very clear that the land and the resources was where all wealth derived from. It is where all wealth comes from. Even you go to the stock market, right? And you think, oh man, look at all this money that's being transferred. Look what is creating that wealth. Some of us not really wealth, but look at it. What companies are being traded? What's being done? It is people, human labor, with the land and the resources, matching those together, making something beneficial for man. And that is where wealth is created from. And if you stop or allow the land and resources to be controlled into one body, and then that body can control what the people use and how they use it, then that body has full control over everything. Wouldn't that be a nice situation for somebody? I wouldn't want that power. But there are many that do. And couple that with extreme environmentalism and with the ideology that humans are an enemy to the species, and you have an extreme, dangerous situation. Our founders understood this, That's why they drafted the Constitution and limited the government, limited the bodies that could bring these powers into one place, if you will. They limited them from doing that. And if I can, I want to be very straightforward, because there has been, for the last, in my lifetime, I have seen over and over and over again, friends, associates, ranchers, miners, loggers, land users, that continue to allow the idea to prosper that the federal government owns the land and resources. They do not. They have not, and they never have. The Constitution prohibits it. The founders knew, and I speak on a principled level. Everything that they did was to keep the land and resources, or the power, if you will, from being consolidated into one body. And yet we run around and have for the last 30 years saying that somehow it's constitutional for the land to be assembled, consolidated into one body. It's completely contrary to the principles of freedom. It's completely contrary to the Bible, to the Judeo-Christian values. The Anglo-Saxons knew it, the founders knew it, and our country prospered because it was distributed to the people, because it was most safe there. Because then they couldn't take all of this put together and control and manipulate the people by what? By not allowing to use the water, by not allowing them to grow a certain crop here or grow crops, by not allowing to have the land. And until we understand that, we cannot fight. We cannot preserve what is right. And we can't get back what's already been taken. My father, whom I love and respect, but also realize that is a tough bird. When I was young, and I think he would admit it, and I have to, but him and I butted heads. Quite a bit. I remember, I'll tell you a story, probably doesn't appreciate this, but we were branding cows in the corral. We got a big round stockade corral. And we were roping the cows, dragging them out, and branding them. And I was getting ornery because my dad was allowing some of the younger kids, or I don't know, to rope on the ground. And it was, it kind of messes up the flow of things. And so I was being ornery with him. And he roped me off the back of my horse. It drug me right off the back. And I was pretty mad and upset, and I laughed and all that. And it's just kind of a funny story now. But I say that because I am not built to just believe somebody because they're my father, or because I have a relationship with somebody. Now that could be a disadvantage to me. But I tell you that because that is my nature. But I tested what my father has taught me. I studied what he taught in depth. And I had 2 years, over the last 2 years, much of it in solitary confinement, to even study further what him and others were trying to teach. And because of those things, my father today is increasing his herds on the land. He's improving more waters and developing our water system in that dry desert. He's expanding his ranch. And even though we spent 2 years in prison suffering, even during that time, the ranch, the cattle never left the range. And it continued to prosper. We repaired all the water infrastructure that they damaged. And we will too. We will continue to prosper. Why? Because he understands who his enemy is. He understands what it truly takes to fight his enemy. And my message today is that you need to understand the same thing. You need to do the same thing. And you need to prosper as a people. You could do it alone if you have to. My father knows, and my family knows how hard a battle that is. Or you can unite and do it together. My father always said, as he went and spoke and tried to motivate the ranchers to nullify their grazing contracts, to recognize their rights, to use them and then defend them. And he said it'll only take 10 of you. He said it'll probably only take 5 of you. And in my opinion, I think he proved that it only takes 1. And people might say, well, it's not over, and maybe it's not. But my father's cattle never left his range in 142 years. Why? Because he wouldn't let them. Because he argued on the correct principles that this land belongs to him. That he established those rights through his forefathers 142 years ago. That he's been using it ever since the day they rode in with the wagon and the little herd they had. That he's improved the ranch. And that when they come to take it, he's willing to defend it. We have been duped as an American people to believe that the courts are where we defend our rights. And I tell you that that is not true, and it never has been. The courts primarily are the takers of rights. And I challenge you to prove that I am wrong. God has given man his freedom. He has charged man and given him the land, the resources, the animals, including the plants, for his benefit. He has given us knowledge of who we are. He's given us the ability to know what makes us happy. And then he's given us the freedom to follow or not follow. And I feel it's a shame that we run to the courts and to the judges and ask for something that's already ours. Something that God has given us. I'll end with a story. Now, my little daughter right here, she's sleeping. Brinkley, are you awake? See how boring I am. I was not able to see my family for nearly 2 years. And I was not able to hold them And the best way I can explain that is a little bit like let's say there's a natural disaster and your kid's at school across town. And you can't get to them. And you know they need you. You know they're suffering. You know they're in great pain. And you cannot get to them. Now that pain caused tremendous sorrow to me. So much that it almost killed me. I thought, how could I go one more minute feeling this way? Now, I didn't know when I'd ever see them or if I would ever see them again. The minimum sentence upon us was 106 years. And I didn't know. There was a point where I was in so much pain that I couldn't stand it. I fell to the ground. And I pled with God, please let me know if I ever get to see my children again in my life. Now, he must have known that I couldn't take any more. Because I believe there's a promise that the Lord will not let us or not give us anything that we can't endure. And so, when I was on my knees in extreme anguish, and I asked that question, will I be able to see my children again and hold them? My friends, before I could even finish the sentence, I felt an amazing light, peace. I can't even explain it. It was almost physical, but it wasn't. And it came into my body from my waist. And it literally pushed out. And I felt it push out the top of my head. This darkness, this anguish, this fear, and this pain. And it filled me with light, with happiness, and with peace. And I knew that moment that I would see my family again. And that I'd be able to go on a road trip with Brinkley. I knew that. And I tell you this because faith is a knowledge of things not seen. But I know that God lives. I know He lives. I know He answers our prayers. I know He gave us this earth to enjoy and to love and to take care of. He gave us the animals to enjoy, to take care of, and for our meat and for our raiment, which is our clothing. And He did it so that we can live here and prosper and be happy. And I tell you these things because I know them. And I know and have seen what happens when we allow those who do not believe this doctrine, do not know the truth, to get in power and to get above us. I know where it leads. I believe that the Hammonds are an example of that. I believe that Harney County is an example of that. I believe that my family, although we are in much better circumstances, have been an example of that. And this began with understanding that if we do not stop what is happening and unite, that ourselves and our children will suffer. And I believe that God cares. That He cares. That He wants us to not allow them to get above us. And so, as the Center for Biological Diversity says, somewhere in here, that we're fanatics, religious fanatics. And I say that we're Christians and that we believe in the Bible. And I know that they are the fanatics. And I am grateful for the knowledge and for the guidance that we have. And I'm thankful for your time. And I pray that we can do some good with the things that have been said here over the last couple of days. And I am being grateful for our Savior and Lord, Jesus Christ.
Amen.
I thought it was really cool to be the MC and be able to do things like try to make it all make sense until I grab the microphone after that. Do you have housekeeping? And then I'll put a summary.
Yep.
Well, what I'd like you guys all to take away from here is the tremendous knowledge that you've gained here, I hope, and we're hoping to put together the documentation of the speeches and the presentations of this last 2 days. And I would like you to carry away the ability and the desire to share those wherever you go. We're going to have videos available of all these presentations. Hopefully, we've got backups. I see we have backups on some of these. Hopefully our techs did the job that we hope they did. And these, I've used last year's presentations over and over and over again. When something arises out there in the world that's applicable to some of the things that we've talked about and taught and shared in these last 3 years, use those videos to inform the people and educate the people on those particular issues that they apply to. Please take this information home. Don't waste this time by not using it down the road for this year and for the next year and the year after. This is valuable information. It's valuable to our goals of educating people about our rights as individuals, as Christians, and as men and women of the United States, the greatest country in the world.
So I think I'm going to tell you what I know. I've been working on this for 20 years. 20 years ago I started doing this because I was not happy with the information that people were beginning to believe about myself, you, my friends and family. We've been doing this, taking care of land and livestock in the United States in a loose name since 1832. And I started doing it and I saw that these groups, like Ammon just talked about, were wonderful at pitting one side against another. And in many cases, they pit us against us. You might be surprised or not to learn that as I started writing about what was happening and doing radio about what was happening in Bunkerville, I got more criticism from fellow farmers and ranchers than I did from non-farm and ranch folks, because I was standing up for a free grazer, somebody that wasn't paying his rent, Wayne. And then when the occupation happened, and I have an advantage because Hank Vogler has been a longtime friend of mine, 18 years. We've done a radio show together every Monday for the past 18 years, and he keeps me wired into all of these issues. And it's not just about federal land and grazing. Ammon just gave you about a 25,000-foot view. I'm going to give you an 80,000-foot view. And I've been holding this information, Aaron, till the right time, and I thought the right time needed to be the most strategic time, and it appears to me now that it is at this moment. You contribute to everything that Ammon has just talked about. Center for Biological Diversity is just one of those organizations that is so strategic and pits one of us against another. But what fuels them? Where do they get their money? They get their money from the affluent who want to create opportunities. Who is the wealthiest man in the United States today? Pardon? Yeah, Mark Bezos. What does he own?
Amazon.
He owns Amazon. What's he also very well invested in? Amazon owns Whole Foods now. They're doing a direct marketing of food programs. They're going to control how and who produces food and where it's produced. That's his overall vision. What's Mark Bezos also his other big investment? Washington Post. Uranium One.
Mm-hmm.
Who did he hire to run his uranium business and move to Calgary so that he was out of sight, out of mind? Does anybody know? A guy by the name of Larry Cornsey. Who's Larry Cornsey? Neil Cornsey's father, who was the director of the BLM. Kind of convenient, isn't it? He's a staunch Democrat. He was a major financial contributor to Hillary Clinton's campaign. How many of you have ever used PayPal? How many of you saw Lisa Bundy complaining and seriously struggling with the fact that money being donated by us to them through PayPal wasn't showing up? How many saw that? Who owns PayPal? A guy by the name of Jeff Thiele. Who's Jeff Thiele? He made the Silicon Valley in San Francisco, or San Joaquin, or what's it called? San Bernardino Valley. What? Santa Clara, San Jose. Silicon Valley, thank you very much. Jeff Thiele was the first outside investor in that right there, Debbie. Facebook. Jeff Thiele owns the monitoring information that was presented at the Portland trial against Ammon Bundy, and how they used and compiled all that data that was going on, and knew how to get people to come out of the woodwork to say what they would never say in a public forum on Facebook, and then that was all used against every one of those occupiers in Portland. And it was owned by who? Jeff Thiele. Jeff Thiele also owns the data, the software system that is being used by the Trump administration to monitor where the illegals are at in this country and how to go find them. He's also one of the major financial contributors to the Trump campaign, a Republican. In fact, he just announced he's leaving the Silicon Valley because he can't stand the liberals anymore. Jeff Thiele and Mark Bezos are very much apart in their political views, but they have a partnership in uranium. And they had one cog in the wheel, a lady by the name of Susie Hammond. And whether it's documented or we can find actual uranium under their property in the Steens Mountain or not, it is very, very viable because I've got information compiled and sent to me about this thick from somebody in this room that I'm not going to name. That there's no doubt the the Hammonds were in the way to continue down the path of what Uranium One wants to do in the United States. And I thought it was time to share all of that, and my concern is that Jeff Thiele today is one of Donald Trump's closest advisors, financial advisors. Because I know no other reason that Dwight and Stephen are still locked up other than the fact that he's getting bad information from somebody, because there has been a ton of us that have supplied factual information and it's gone unheard at this point. I wrote stuff that I know got inside the White House. So I guess the reason I'm sharing this with you in close is that we have to be very careful that we don't contribute to our own demise. And I've seen us do this through the years, Reed. We continue to just go fund organizations that we know are funneling money back into what we're talking about. Ammon just walked us so clearly through. I know exactly how all of this has taken place, and I've spent a tremendous amount of time studying it and researching it. Here's the bad news. This is just one little example of what we have happening all around the world. And now we do it in the name of the United Nations so that we can come and control even more. It was the first government in the world to give a legal right to animals. Horses and dogs, to be exact. Look it up, 1939. It was the same government that was the first government to give protection to land and treat the earth like a cathedral, and created the Endangered Species Act and created a Wilderness Area Act. The same government that had a vegetarian leader, the same government that would believe that the petrochemical world was killing people and he only ate and promoted organic food. The same government that killed 7 million Jews and believed that the human race was the problem. And it was called the National Socialist Party. And if you're not scared, the bejeebers scared out of you today when you see college kids like I saw in Nebraska last week holding signs that say, take the risk out of your life, vote socialism. I think that the reason for me to close in this way is not to scare you, the bejeebers out of you, isn't that the word from yesterday? But rather to motivate you to no longer be complacent, to sit back and say, oh, I can't do anything about it. Because we just witnessed a young man and his family, and we know other families in this room that have been willing to say, we're going to suffer the consequences to be that one person to make a difference. And that, to me, is the champions for abundance, is that we have identified another group of one people, one person at a time, in your home area, your home county, that are going to go home and say, we're going to take a stand and make a difference. Final thing, Doug's holding up questionnaires. He would like you to take a questionnaire, sign it, fill it out before you leave. I absolutely think we've created a momentum here. It's been a fantastic 2 days. Thank you for your contribution and your part. Kathy Smith, we can't say thank you enough for all that you do, and you never want to get recognized. That's why I wanted to recognize you. Ladies and gentlemen, please recognize Kathy Smith and the spirit of Bert Smith that continues to be with us. What are you going to do different tomorrow than you did yesterday? That's what I'm asking you to take home.
See y'all next year.
Woo!